let's add a submit button. So underneath this paragraph, I'm going to make another paragraph, inside which I will create a button element. I'll give it an attribute of type with a value of submit. Not just any button, a submit type button. And I'll make its contents just the word go. Check that out in the browser. Yay, we have a button. So now with JavaScript, we want to make it so that something happens when the form is submitted. So much of what we will do in JavaScript is handle events. So there are lots of events built in to the DOM. Things like form submissions, button clicks, mouse movements, keyboard keys. All those things are events, and we can listen for them to occur. And we can listen for them to occur on a particular element so that we may then fire some sort of behavior when that happens. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to add an event listener. We're going to listen for an event to occur on the page, and then we're going to run some code when that happens. So let's add a separate file to our project and call it index.js. We're just going to keep our JavaScript in a separate file. Now our HTML needs to know that that script file is there. So just before the closing body tag, after this section, let's add a script tag. Now we could actually start writing JavaScript in between the opening and closing tags, but we're going to use a separate file. So in the opening tag, where attributes belong, add an attribute called source, src. And we just need to put the relative path to that JavaScript file, index.js. So script source equals index.js. Now before I go typing 100 lines of JavaScript and then go and refresh the page over and over and get frustrated because nothing's working but I don't see any error messages, I'm going to just write one simple thing in my JavaScript file to make sure that this part is hooked up right. So I'm going to hop over to index.js and just type console log. It worked. Refresh the page, look at my console, and yeah, it says it worked. Now I'm not going to keep that there. That was just there to make sure that I was pointing at the right file. So what we want to do is listen for that form to be submitted. So we could probably stand to grab that form from the page using document.query selector. Yeah, go ahead.
So you said there should be 3 commits on the page?
I made 3 commits. If you don't have 3, that's fine, whatever. There should be as many commits as you've actually made if you pushed, as long as you pushed after your last commit.
So it just keeps editing the index.html file?
Well, if you edit the index.html file and then do an add and a commit, then it'll just keep tracking the changes you make to that file. Whatever changes you make. It doesn't do anything that you don't tell it to do. So we had to explicitly add that over and over. So query selector, we want to grab that form, right? What if there were more than one form on the page? Let's go ahead and give this form an ID. So back in the HTML, the opening tag of the form, I'm going to say ID equals person form. And I use query selector instead of query selector all. Why? Because query selector all would find all matches and put them in some sort of array-like collection. And I just want the one thing. So query selector just returns one element. or one node from the page. What should I put in the quotes to get that form? Who wants a sucker? Like you mean it. Like you really mean it. Okay. That's the correct answer. And you said it with a smile. Hash person form. That'll do it. It'll find the element with the ID person form. Let's go ahead and save that to a variable. I'm going to use the const keyword. Const person form. Just a variable name I chose. It happens to be the same as the ID because it makes a lot of sense to use that. But there's nothing magic about that. If we want to prove that worked, we could refresh the page and check down here. Actually, using const, it might not show up, but let's see. Person form, yeah, it's there. So our variable is set. So now we promised that we can add an event listener, which will wait for a particular event to occur on a specific node in the DOM. All of the elements and all of the text content in the DOM, we call those nodes. So let's say person form dot, and look, the very first thing it suggests is add event listener. What do you suppose that does? That is a method. The first argument is the event that we're listening for. Events are things like click, mouse over, mouse out, mouse move, key press. Submit is the one we want. So we pass the string submit. And it will listen for a submit event to occur on person form. The second argument is a function to run when that occurs. We could put an anonymous function in place here, and we'll do that sometimes, but we're not going to do that right now. We're going to make a named function. So let's go ahead and write the function. Let's call it handle submit. And then down here in add event listener, first argument is the event that we're listening for. The second argument is the function that will handle the event. So handle submit. Notice I do not say handle submit open close parens because the argument is the actual function itself as an object. We're passing around an actual function as an argument. Happens all the time in JavaScript. If I put the parentheses in there, it would be passing the return value. We're not the ones invoking this function. JavaScript will do it for us when this event fires. So we're just telling it about the function, and then it's going to run it when person form is submitted. So let's make handle submit actually do something. Submit. And let's see what happens. Refresh the page. Tappity tappity. Go. Ah, cuss, man. What happened? Watch your console real carefully there for a second. Let's do that again. Whackity schmackity. I saw something there very briefly. I saw submit. Did you see it? It was real quick. So here's the problem. When you use add event listener, it doesn't replace what happens when that event occurs. It just adds to it. So it's going to run our event handler, but it's also going to do whatever it was going to do anyway, namely submit the form and redraw the whole page. So our console went away really fast. So we have to stop that from happening. Luckily, we have the tools to do so. Whenever a function is fired because of an event, whenever it's an event handler, it will always be passed an event object as an argument. JavaScript, helpfully, never enforces the number of arguments something receives. You can always pass in too many or too few, and JavaScript itself doesn't care. It never enforces it. So it's been passing an event in here all along. We just weren't doing anything with it. So let's go ahead and give that argument a name. Remember, we don't do anything down here to do that. When the event fires, it's just automatically going to pass in this argument. Let's have a look at that object real quick. I'm going to add a breakpoint to the page by just using the word debugger. By doing that, when that line runs, execution is going to pause and it's going to open it up in our console. That way we can look at this event object. Refresh the page, submit it. Let's put Tom in here. Okay. It paused. Got all kinds of information here. Here's event. Let's go over to the console where it's a little less cluttered since we're on a giant screen. Let's just type EV. Okay, we see event is trusted true, type submit, target, form ID person form. Current target, also form ID person form. Default prevented, false. Interesting. Preventing the default is kind of what we want to do. We want to prevent the default behavior for this event. Let's see if we can maybe do that. Event.prevent default method. So we invoke it with open close parens, and let's see if that just happens to be the right thing. Sorry. Submit. Yay, we did it. So events have a method on them called prevent default that prevents whatever the default behavior for that particular event is. Sometimes we don't need to prevent the default because it doesn't do anything. But in the case of a form submission, if we want to stop the form from actually submitting, we need to call prevent default. Then it'll do this and it won't refresh the whole darn page. So why did we look for submit on the form instead of click on the button? You gotta think of a reason why we didn't just say button and wait for the click event. What would be wrong with that? Let's submit this again. Let's type Deanna. What did I do? Did I click the button? No, I hit enter on my keyboard, right? You can submit forms by hitting enter on your keyboard. So just waiting for them to click the submit button is not a very good way to capture whether they submitted the form. So there is a submit event on forms that captures both. So that's better. All right, cool. We've at least got it doing something when the form submits. Just not anything terribly interesting. So it'd be nice if we could get what was typed into the form field. That seems like a reasonable thing to do. Let's see how we might be able to do it. So we need to get that text box out of the form. Now we happen to have the form already saved to a variable, but that's kind of cheating. Because what if there were more than one form on the page and they all used this same function when they were submitted? Then we wouldn't know which one's which. So we have a better way. If you remember from when we were looking at it down here in the console, the event also has a property called target. And that is the node on which the event occurred. So if it's a button click, then event target is the button. If it's a link click, the target is the link. If it's a form submit, the target is the form. So ev.target will give us the form that was actually submitted. So let's just save that to a variable. Const f for form equals event target. And then we can do stuff with it. So let's have a look at that. I'm just going to throw a debugger in there again so we can play around with it. Kyle. All right. Go back to the console. Let's look at F. It's the form. Yay. Let's try F dot different things. Oh man, there's a lot of stuff here. Ooh, elements. Looks like an array-like thing with the input and the button, and looks like it has a key of person name that I could get to. Well, guess what? The form itself also has that key. Since we gave our input a name, input name equals person name, we can just type f.personname, and it will get that field from the form. So let's just console log f.personname, see what we got. Zoe. It's the whole input, not just what we typed. So how do we get just what we typed? Anybody happen to know? Anybody done this before? If you have an input and you want what's actually typed into it, you can use .value. So f.personname gets us the input. .value gets us what's actually typed in there. Do it again. There we go. But logging it to the console isn't terribly exciting. What else could we do? Hey, we learned how to change the H1, right? What if we did that? Think we could do that with what was typed in there? I think we could. So first we would need to get that H1, right? Let's grab it from the page. I want to grab it from the page. What do I start typing? Like you mean it, sorry. That's right, have a sucker. Document dot query selector. The string H1 ought to do it, right? Okay, so we could save that to a variable if we want to, or we could just start chaining things on here. Whatever. Const heading equals document.querySelector H1. Then we want to change the text content, right? Heading dot text content equals f dot person name dot value. It's too easy. That can't be all it is. Do you believe? I believe. Let's type PG in there. Submit. Holy smokes. It changed the heading right there. Live in person. Can you believe it? Let's try it again. Skylar. Yeah. It works. We just changed the contents of the page using the power of JavaScript and the DOM. Class dismissed. Don't come back tomorrow. We're all done. We know how to transform the web, bend it to our will. No, you guys wouldn't accept that, would you? You're too eager to learn. I knew you wouldn't fall for it. But hey, this feels like a major accomplishment. Let's go ahead and commit this to our repository. That way, if we break things after this, we could always get back to this point. Another reason to use source code management. Now, if I type get status, notice 2 files have changed since last time, right? We've modified index.html and we have a brand new index.js. So we need to add both of them. So we'll just type get add space dot, and that will add all of the changes to the index, stage them. And then we'll type commit, get commit, give it a message. We'll say update heading with text box value. Be nice and descriptive with what's changed since our last commit. If I type git push, then it will sync it with GitHub. Let's look. Refresh out here. And I see a 4th commit, update heading with text box value. All right. Rock and roll.